My name is Lauren Whitaker. I'm 29, and I never expected to be turned away from my cousin's funeral with the words, "Family means nothing without blood." If you've ever felt overlooked or betrayed by your own family, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Like this video and subscribe for more stories like this. The funeral wasn't even for someone distant. It was for Aunt Diane's son, Tyler, the only one who treated me like I mattered. He died in a motorcycle accident, and the service was in a small chapel just outside of town. I drove 2 hours to be there. I wore black. I brought flowers. I didn't expect to be welcomed, but I didn't expect to be blocked at the door either. It was Uncle Dean who stopped me. He didn't shout. He just stepped in front of me with this cold little smirk. "Don't make this harder than it has to be, Lauren," he said. "This is for family." I stood still, not understanding. My hands tightened around the flowers. "I am family," I whispered. "That's not what Diane says. You're not blood." He nodded toward the door. "Go." I felt the sting behind my eyes before I could stop it. I hadn't cried in years. Not at my high school graduation they skipped. Not at my college showcase they never mentioned. But this? This was Tyler. "He wanted me here," I said, voice low. "You don't get to erase that." Dean didn't budge. Blood only. He turned and walked in. The door clicked shut behind him like a verdict. And just like that, I was standing in the cold, with roses in my hands and nowhere to grieve. I didn't drive off. I sat in my car for 38 minutes, staring at the stained glass window through the windshield. I watched people file out one by one, cousins I hadn't seen in years, old neighbors, even a coworker from Tyler's job. But not me, not the girl they raised until I was 8. Not the one who lived in their basement for 2 years after Mom died. Not the one who changed Tyler's bandages when he wiped out on his skateboard at 11. They cut me out, like I was some orphan favor they were done repaying. That night, I made a list of 4 things they'd never see coming, because if they wanted to play the real blood game, they should have checked the birth certificates first, and one very old paternity test in my mother's safety box. The DNA test was sealed in a worn envelope, yellowing around the edges. I hadn't looked at it in years. Mom gave it to me on my 16th birthday, wrapped between 2 letters and a photo of a man I never met. "You'll need this someday," she had said. "Not for now, but one day." At 16, I barely understood. By 29, I understood everything. Dean wasn't just my uncle, he was my father, and that changed everything. I didn't open the envelope right away. I needed to remember what came before. The years of sitting at the kids' table, even at 18, the birthdays forgotten or rescheduled, the wedding invite they accidentally sent late after the RSVP deadline. I was always the outsider, the charity case. The girl they raised because that's what family does, until they didn't want to anymore. Mom had me when she was just 19. The story was always vague. Some summer fling, while nannying for the Whitakers. They said Dean was out of town that whole season. But the math never added up, and neither did the silence. Diane, his wife, always looked at me with this controlled disdain. Not hatred, something quieter, like disgust buried in civility. "You're just like her," she said once when I spilled orange juice on her rug at 9. She didn't mean clumsy. She meant my mother. Dean was never cruel. He just wasn't anything. Not warm, not distant. He existed in the gray space between guilt and denial. But Tyler made it all bearable. We were only a year apart. He used to sneak me extra cookies when Diane wasn't looking, called me sis when no one else did. We shared a room until he turned 10. Even then, he'd leave his door open at night because I was scared of thunder. He once told me, "If they make you leave, I'm leaving too." He didn't. He stayed. And I don't blame him for that. When I turned 18, Diane sat me down and said, "You're not entitled to anything here." I hadn't asked for anything. Just a reference letter for a job application. She made it clear. "This house, this family, it's not yours. Be grateful for what you had." So I packed what little I owned and left. I worked double shifts through college, waitressing, tutoring, editing papers at 2 a.m. for international students just to keep the lights on. No one from the Whitaker side ever called. Not once. Until Tyler died. Then I got a text. Service is Saturday, 11 a.m. Don't make it about you. I hadn't. They did. Now, standing in my apartment with the envelope in hand, I realized something. They didn't reject me because I wasn't family. They rejected me because I was more family than they could admit. I waited 3 days before calling Dean. He didn't answer, of course, so I left a message. I think we need to talk. It's about my mother and you. No reply. I sent a follow-up text with a picture of the envelope. No caption. Just the corner of the test, visible enough to show it wasn't empty. 5 minutes later, he called. His voice was taut, sharp around the edges. What is this? He demanded. It's your truth. Mine, too. Silence. Then, don't you dare come here. I didn't respond to that. He hung up before I could. The next week, I showed up anyway, not to his house, but to the Whitaker estate office. Dean ran the family trust. Their name was on 2 restaurants, a development firm, and a string of short-term rentals across the coast. I walked in like a client. Neutral blazer, pressed slacks, hair back. The receptionist didn't even flinch when I gave my name. I had an appointment, booked under my full legal name, Lauren K. Whitaker, the same surname they tried to pretend wasn't mine. Dean walked in 5 minutes late, pale but composed. This is a mistake, he said, sitting down across from me. No, it was a mistake to pretend I was nothing. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize either. What do you want? He asked finally. To be told the truth, just once, in your voice. He didn't move. I have the test, Dean. You signed it. It's dated. His jaw twitched. That was a legal formality. Your mother wanted. My mother wanted me to know who I was. I could see the tension pull at his shoulders. I paid child support, he muttered. No, you paid guilt insurance. Quietly. Through your lawyer, through Mom's account. He stood up. This conversation is over. I stayed seated. No, it's just beginning. That was the last time I saw him in person. After that, the Whitakers ghosted me harder than ever. Calls ignored. Emails bounced back. Diane even blocked me on social media. Not that I ever messaged her. But then I received a letter, not a text, not a call. A certified envelope from a lawyer. Cease and desist any contact with Dean Whitaker. You are not a recognized member of the family. That's when it clicked. They weren't just rejecting me. They were scared of me. Scared of what I might prove, what I might say, what I might be entitled to. And that fear? Mastapli. That was power. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I opened my laptop and started writing, not an email, not a letter, a list of steps. 3, to be exact. Verify the DNA test through an accredited lab. Submit a paternity affidavit for legal acknowledgment. Request a court-ordered mediation for estate review. Because if they wanted silence, they were about to get paperwork instead. The DNA test came back in 3 weeks. Confirmed. 99.98% probability. Dean Whitaker was my biological father. But this time, I didn't deliver it in person. I submitted it as part of my petition to the court, alongside the affidavit, alongside the notarized letters from my mother's old attorney, letters Dean had signed, verifying financial support and discrete custody agreements. Turns out, avoiding scandal didn't mean erasing paper trails. I never filed for inheritance. I didn't want a dime of their money, but I did file for legal recognition, and in doing so, I triggered an automatic audit of the Whitaker family trust. Because legally, a new heir meant reevaluation of the family beneficiaries. And just like that, I was a problem they couldn't ignore. Their attorney tried to intimidate me. We can settle this quietly, he said. Dean's willing to offer a private payout under seal. I declined. Seal it if you want, but I want acknowledgement, not a bribe. The hearing was scheduled for August. Small courtroom. Just a judge, 2 lawyers, and 1 woman who had spent her life being called not family. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I brought the test, the letters, the photos. One of them was of me on Dean's lap, age 4, blowing out birthday candles. Diane was cropped out, but the tension in her jaw was still visible in the background. They had known. All of them. For decades. The judge was impartial, but the law wasn't vague. Under our state statutes, adult children with verified paternity could file for status correction, especially if financial transactions or records existed. Within 45 minutes, the order was granted. Dean Whitaker was legally and publicly recognized as my father. I didn't post about it. I didn't gloat, but the news got out. The family's real estate website was quietly updated, a new disclaimer added to their legacy page. The Whitaker family now had 4 heirs, not 3. That same month, I bought a house. Not just any house. It was the foreclosed cabin Diane's brother used to own, the one where they all went for holiday trips I was never invited to. The one they posted pictures from every year with captions like, "Family, nothing matters more." I bought it in cash. And I didn't tell a soul. I just changed the locks, repainted the shutters, and on Christmas Eve, I lit a single lantern on the porch, the same way they always did. Only this time, no one came. It wasn't revenge, exactly. It was reclamation of truth, of space, of history. The first holiday in that cabin was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. No screaming kids, no clinking wine glasses. No Diane telling me to sit over there while she praised her real nieces. Just me, a fireplace, and the sharp, clean peace of not needing to prove anything to anyone. It was strange at first, like standing on a stage where no one showed up to the performance. But after everything, the denial, the letters, the courtroom, I didn't need an audience. I just needed the silence to mean something. So I made it mine. I started a tradition. Not of decorating or big meals, but of writing. Each year, on the same day they used to host Whitaker Christmas, I write one letter, not to them, to Tyler. I tell him everything, how the legal process went, how Dean never apologized, how Diane's name has quietly vanished from a few property records, how I finally built something I didn't need permission to belong to. The second year, I planted lavender outside the cabin. The third year, I started hosting grief circles for people like me who had nowhere to go during holidays. We sit in a circle. We share. We don't judge. Some of them cry when I say, "They told me I wasn't blood." Some nod in recognition. Some laugh bitterly. All of us get it. Because it was never about blood. It was about belonging and who gets to define it. One of the women, Ava, hugged me after the third meeting and said, "You're more family to me than my cousins ever were." That sentence did something inside me, healed something I didn't know was still raw. I never chased Dean after that. He sent one more letter, years later, through a paralegal. It was cold. He had been diagnosed with something terminal. He was making peace with everyone he'd ever misunderstood. He wanted me to sign a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for a small piece of land on the outskirts of town. I shredded the letter. Peace wasn't a paper trail. It was a choice, and I'd already made mine. I didn't need a title to be whole. I just needed to stop asking strangers to call me family. The cabin has become more than a home. It's a marker, a line in the sand where everything before was silence and everything after was mine. No more chasing invitations. No more deciphering passive-aggressive texts. No more trying to prove that I mattered to people who decided I didn't. I began to live like I belonged in my own life. I changed my last name. Not to Whitaker, not back to my mother's maiden name either. I chose something new, Lauren K. Dawson. Something that carried no shame. No inheritance. Only intention. People ask sometimes, "Didn't it hurt, finding out your dad never claimed you?" And I answer honestly. It hurt more when I thought it was my fault, because for so long, I believed it was me, that I wasn't bright enough, good enough to be included. The family had been a locked door, and I kept asking for a key, not realizing they were the ones fumbling in the dark, too ashamed to admit they'd changed the locks. It wasn't my shame to carry. I went to Tyler's grave that spring. I brought sunflowers, his favorite. I didn't wear black. I wore blue, like the hoodie he always wore in high school. I sat for a long time, told him everything, the court, the test, the truth. And then I said you were my family, before they told me I wasn't. The wind picked up right then. Call it a coincidence, call it what you want, but I felt peace. Later that year, I spoke at a conference on family estrangement and legal identity. My story wasn't flashy, but people listened. One woman sobbed in the hallway afterward. Said her daughter had been erased from a family tree too. We hugged, we didn't say much, we didn't need to. Some truths don't need proving anymore, they just need naming. And once you name them, really name them, they stop owning you. The last letter I wrote to Tyler wasn't on Christmas. It was in July, after I received a call from the probate clerk. Dean Whitaker had passed. The family filed his final will. There was no mention of me. Not a single word. The same way he'd lived, pretending I didn't exist. And for the first time, I didn't feel gutted. I didn't feel rage. I felt nothing. And that, somehow, was freedom. I didn't go to the service. I didn't need to be told, this is for family. I already knew I was more than what they called me. I was the proof they buried, the truth they couldn't smother. Instead, I spent the day painting the cabin's front door, soft pine green, Tyler's favorite color. After it dried, I added a small brass plate near the frame. It read, family, defined by truth, not blood. A week later, Ava, the woman from my grief circle, came by with her son. He ran through the lavender, barefoot, laughing. And in that moment, I understood the full circle of it all. I had become what they were too afraid to be. Present, honest, whole. I built a family that wasn't bound by genetics or last names. Just love, chosen love. Some nights, I sit on the porch with tea, watching the sun go down behind the hills. Sometimes I write, sometimes I don't. I no longer need to prove who I am. I already have. And I carry that not as a weapon, but as peace. Because the best revenge wasn't the courtroom. It wasn't the cabin. It wasn't even the paternity test. It was living a life that made all of their rejection irrelevant. Have you ever had to walk away from people you once called family? Drop your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your power. Send this to someone who needs to know they're not alone.